Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. We caught up earlier today with Max Porterfield. He's the CEO of Calnex Mines. They've got 3 assets in Canada. If you want to hear our thoughts and opinions on those projects and indeed the conversation itself and of course the company, you can find that at cruxinvestor.com/club. We can also find detailed company reports. There's commentary from experts from around the world on a variety of commodities and companies. There are training videos. There are summaries of other interviews that we've done just to save you a bit of time. And of course, there's our community of investors sharing their thoughts and ideas with each other in a nice, safe environment. So do go along and join them at cruxinvestor.com/club. Of course, we'd love your feedback too. So do give us a like and leave your comments below. And of course, if you want to see what we talked about, take a look in the description below. Max, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. It's early there, so I appreciate you getting up and joining us for this call. You're in Vancouver at the moment. How are things?
It's beautiful here. I'm really enjoying things despite everything going on in the world. I think it's a really exciting time in life in general.
Fantastic. Okay, good. Well, look, we're going to hear your story. We've not met before, spoken before, so I'm keen to hear your story. But can you kick off and give us a 1-minute overview of the business, and then I'll pick it up from there, okay?
Yeah, sure. We're an exploration company that's focused on making discoveries, base and precious metals rich VMS discoveries within known Canadian mining jurisdictions. So our portfolio spans these different jurisdictions. We have proximate infrastructure and the people in place and obviously immediate need for new discoveries. And that's what we're here to do across the portfolio.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, great. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you? What's your background, track record?
In terms of my background, I'm American by background. I was born and raised in Texas. And then started my career working at U.S. Global Investors under the mentorship of Frank Holmes, who taught me quite a bit. So that was a great stepping stone, so to speak, really learning in terms of how to attract institutional capital and what institutional investors look for when they're making an investment into the natural resource sector. So I really had a number of different roles there. And then I immigrated to Canada in 2012, actually recently became a Canadian citizen in 2019, which I'm quite proud of. It's a really wonderful country, and obviously I'm very, very glad to be here. And joined two different companies in doing investor relations capacity, Uranium Energy Corp, and then what's now Gold Mining Inc. And then after a few years of that, I left and joined Calnex. Had an opportunity to meet Mike Maslowski, our former chairman, a current team member as well for the company. And he gave me a tremendous opportunity and I've been at the helm of Calnex now for over 6.5 years.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, well, why don't we kick off with, the plan? There's always a plan to these things. You've got 3 areas that you're working in, and multiple projects, and it's a relatively, small company at the moment. Okay, you're looking at 35 odd million Canadian. So you're going to have to be quite targeted about how you approach this. So do you want to maybe give us a bit of background as to, how you kind of have structured this?
Absolutely. So in terms of the portfolio, when I came onto the company, it was actually a graphite company. But then really realized the underlying value in the company was in the base and precious metals rich or prospective portfolio in Flin Flon. I looked at Flin Flon as a jurisdiction, had a very rich history, spans now almost 100 years of continuous production. But if you looked out further on the horizon, and I think that's a big thing that I'm focused on, is always looking out further into the future and the implications of that. And you saw that the 777 mine, the mine that was the flagship mine that was operating, had really a finite life, and it was due to shut down very soon. And that's now very imminent in Q2 2022. And that's when we started exploring that area and the focus and back into the roots of the company's history in base and precious metals exploration. Because the company is actually a spin out of a company called Callinan Mines, which has a rich history and was actually receiving the 777 royalty up until the spin out in 2011 when Calnex was formed. And then later, as we were continuing to explore Manitoba, realized an opportunity to replicate the same model and doing, again, exploration and proximity to infrastructure. And then that's when we acquired the portfolio in Eastern Canada, the Nash Creek, Superjack, and now Headway projects in the Bathurst district of New Brunswick, as well as the Point Leamington projects in the Buckens camp of Newfoundland. And we've, since that time spread our wings. We've had a number of successes in the portfolio. We were able to double the resource size in New Brunswick very quickly at Nash Creek, and we put out a maiden PEA on the property in early 2018. And then subsequent to that, the wind kind of got taken out of our sails temporarily with the shorter term collapse in zinc prices due to the trade war. But that never really stopped the longer term focus of the company, what our objectives were, and we continue to advance these assets through exploration, very low cost with big upside as we're testing on a regional scale, targets across the portfolio.
Right. So talk to me about this, because I'm always fascinated by junior companies in the early days. Okay, there's lots of restrictions. You can't just walk in this thing and think everything's going to work out of the gate, right? So Flin Flon with the Pine Bay project would you consider that your primary asset that you're going to spend your time, money, and attention on?
Well, we've been advancing these assets again since we acquired all three of the assets in 2016 in some form or fashion. So in terms of capital costs moving forward in Manitoba, the bulk of the capital will go to Manitoba and the Rainbow Discovery. And that's really more so a function of cost of exploration in Manitoba relative to New Brunswick in a lot of ways. Obviously, you have exceptional high-grade copper that we've discovered at the Rainbow Discovery within a mineral lease, adjacent to high-voltage power line, historic headframe, and 20-minute drive to Flin Flon, where all those they have infrastructure in place. With that being said, the exploration costs in Manitoba are significantly higher than the exploration costs that you have in New Brunswick. And that's really when I say in terms of where's your focus, our focus is in developing these assets in tandem. And everyone, a lot of people ask in terms of where is your budgeting? Well, the budgeting is really driven by costs. When you're doing deeper exploration with diamond drilling in Manitoba, your costs can be much higher than the near surface drilling that you have in New Brunswick. So it's really a function of cost, but absolutely the focus of the exploration going forward is going to be Manitoba and the Rainbow Discovery. But that's not to say that there's going to be no focus on the rest of the portfolio.
No, I understand, and therein lies the balance of managing budgets and managing markets and managing, your company and your people. So I get that, but again, it might be worth actually just talking briefly about the corporate structure, because I noticed that you've got a very tight share structure there at the moment. I mean, how have you set it up? And tell us about, maybe who's in it, because the management have a significant share in this company as of today. But going forward, you are going to have to bring, more money in, and, what is that going to look like for you? How do you imagine that working?
Yeah. So again, since I've taken over the company, Callance, we have brought on a number of significant shareholders, and we still have a significant shareholder base today. And one of the things that we did when we were having a kind of rewrite on the exploration portfolio, when really everyone looked at the company based on our Nash Creek assets in New Brunswick, because it was a zinc-rich asset. We just announced a PEA, and then the wind kind of got taken out of our sails again on the pullback. And one of the things looking forward was I do feel that we're in a secular bull market for the base and precious metals market, and being prepared for that. And some of the household and keeping items, so to speak, was on the restructuring of the company and the rollback. So we did do a rollback last year at 50 cents a share. I think it was very, very timely in terms of where we are today, and really in terms of the breakdown. And I was a big acquirer of the stock last year. I've been a big acquirer of the stock this year again, and more recently exercised some options. I think that got announced this morning to continue to build my position. So I am a very significant large shareholder. I'm about 5% of the float. My family is a big supporter of my career in the company and big believers in what we're doing as well. In terms of collectively over 10%. Resource Capital Funds owns 8%. Been a very, very long-term supportive shareholder base. The Savellis out of Europe in the family office, they own roughly 8 or 9%. Maslowski, our former chairman, owns 5% as well. So again, tightly held in terms of the 11 million shares out. We can place, on 10 fingers about half that float. And I think that's very, very critical moving forward, is to managing that and bringing shareholders like RCF that believe in the longer term vision of the company across its portfolio, and really making those discoveries at an exceptionally low cost relative to our peers, given the fact that we are exploring in close proximity to these camps. And that is really a way to compress our exploration costs as well and make our exploration dollars go much further.
Okay, but it's been a sort of tough market. It's been kind of soft market in a way with regards to zinc, which is what you were after initially. And price kind of fell away there, and I think a lot of zinc explorers have struggled a little bit there. But you've kind of got a kind of polymetallic component across these assets. So I guess you've been able to tell slightly different stories depending on how the market's changed. Because I noticed with obviously with Pine Bay, it was initially a sort of silver story, but it's become more of a copper story. So, polymetallic works in your favor in these scenarios.
Yeah, I think we've been very, very blessed as a company, very, very fortunate. If you look at Nash Creek, for example, we entered Nash Creek. Nash Creek wasn't very readily understood. It's a lower grade zinc deposit. If you look at globally, 85% of zinc production is underground, not open pitable. So it's not often that you come across a zinc deposit that's flat lying near surface, and we were able to double it very quickly. And there's really, I'd say the challenge there is telling that story in terms of the zinc market. But when we, in fact, the results of our regional exploration has shifted the focus to the silver. Discovering silver along, 6.8 kilometers apart along a main controlling fault is quite unique. The only thing analogous that we can kind of draw a similar conclusion to is the Dolly Varden discovery in British Columbia. And so it's very, very unique in terms of what we're onto in New Brunswick. If you look at Pine Bay, we had a lot of attention. At one point, our company was worth over $50 million of market cap on one discovery hole at Pine Bay. In Pine Bay, we always had a target to make an elephant of a discovery. That there's a big footprint there in terms of a very large alteration package, one of the largest known felsic rock package, which is the host rock to over 90% of the ore ever mined in Flin Flon. And we hit a zinc discovery. It was a zinc-rich discovery, and it got the market's attention, but we weren't able to replicate it. But we learned from those setbacks, and that's really the thing in terms of not stopping when you hit a hurdle. And that's what led us to change the exploration model at Pine Bay and take a new approach, a new look. And that's when we hit on, obviously, the exceptional copper grades that are also gold, silver, and zinc bearing.
Right, and that's going to get people excited. People are excited. Copper prices, made a good recovery this year. Gold and silver has done well up until the last month or so. So I bet that's gone down well in terms of being able to talk to the market. And I think we've seen your share price since the end of July, August. More than double in price. I think people are listening to that, but how do you move that story forward? Because it's about it's about the amount of metal contained in the ground. That's where you're going to need to start proving that up. So how do you envisage doing that?
Well, it's going to be through the drill bit as usual. I think right now in Pine Bay, in a lot of ways, we hit one discovery, and it was a really nice hole. And again, it was a proof of concept, the discovery hole that we hit in 2016 there. And that discovery hole is actually what you would say kept the engine going in terms of not turning our back on the opportunity at Pine Bay. And so now, we've got to rebuild investor confidence on the discovery in Pine Bay. And I think the Rainbow discovery, whereas today, having 3 different holes into the discovery at this point that are widely spaced, having a big significant step out from that discovery really makes it a bona fide discovery. And the next steps there going to the new year is going to be about obviously drilling out the mineralization at the Rainbow discovery, as well as go on a regional look on expanding the regional footprint through exploration and using IP, which has been a tremendous aid in terms of vectoring to make that discovery at Rainbow. In terms of in New Brunswick, we're following up with a soil sampling campaign to target. It's a very low-cost exploration approach for us. I think the entire campaign for soil sampling roughly ran around $60,000. But that gives us a very, very good vectoring to follow up on the near-surface silver that we discovered last year. And then, obviously announcing those and following up through drilling next year to build that and show size, scale, and obviously tons, because tons at the end of the day is what matters most in this business. And building upon those discoveries. So I look at 2019 as the year that we really rewrote the exploration playbook across the portfolio. 2020 is executing on making the initial discoveries. And then I foresee 2021 and beyond is really drilling out those discoveries and advancing the discoveries that we made this year. And now in Newfoundland, it's a little bit different situation in Newfoundland because it's a much more advanced stage asset in Point Leamington. And that's going to be a different discovery that we've made this year. And that was really discovering a deficiency in a historic resource in a lot of ways. If you look at Point Leamington, the resource itself historically was modeled with a 4% cutoff grade zinc equivalent, which is a cutoff grade you'll use for an underground resource. But when you actually look at the resource itself, it's near surface, and you look at it, naturally think it'd be amenable to an open pit operation. And really re-reviewing that in 2019 as we were rewriting things led to that, really deficiencies in the resource, which we're looking to update this year. And it'll be a pit-constrained resource at Point Leamington that also sits within a mineral lease. So it's not often that you have an indicated resource that is within a pit, and it can be pit constrained within a jurisdiction. It's already, advanced permitting, and then you can really quickly accelerate and get that revaluation on those assets and bring partners in. So that's how we're advancing each asset across the portfolio. In 2020 was making these initial discoveries, and I foresee 2021 being really the year that we're going to drill those out, and the world can see how really impressive I believe they're going to become and what they grow to be.
Okay, so to advance these discoveries, you're going to need capital. You've got Manitoba Mineral Development Fund have just agreed $300,000 Canadian. You've obviously got some cash in the kitty as well. Is it going to be enough to allow you to advance those discoveries next year?
I mean, obviously, we're going to have to do an equity raise. An equity raise will come at some point, and at the same time, when we do that, it's going to be dependent on when we think it's most suitable for us. But obviously, all companies need to raise capital, and we're looking to raise capital with the right investor more so than the first investor that walks up and says hello. I mean, there's obviously a significant amount of interest in the company, and we will recapitalize the company. In due order, of course.
Okay, and so that sounds like strategic investor, which may or not be partner, JV, farm in, farm out. All of the above is on the table, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it'd be more looking at equity financing on a corporate level, whether it be a strategic or not. I'm indifferent to that at this very, very moment. I think what the next step for the company is that for very low capital costs, we can advance these assets tremendously and then bring on partners when our shareholder base can get better realized value for the assets that are inherently in the portfolio. You're looking at a portfolio today that, is worth $35 million, and arguably, I believe it's worth significantly more than that as it sits, based upon, a number of different factors that are inherently intrinsic in the portfolio today. So obviously, we are going to do a capital raise, whether that's a strategic or not, really dependent. And as far as I can see, it's really focused on bringing investors that believe in the longer term vision of the organization, because that's what keeps your structure tight, and that's what keeps a motivated shareholder base that understands the ebbs and flow of exploration, like RCF. I mean, they've been tremendous shareholders in more ways than one. And as we bring on new shareholders, we want shareholders that believe in the longer term vision, like they have. And in terms of RCF, in terms of this Savelli's, for example, as well, in terms of the family office. Those are investors that have a long-standing history in natural resource exploration, and they understand the ups and downs of it, and they understand we're in a long game here, and I think we're on the cusp of some very big things, and you just want to bring on investors and shareholders that really are aligned with that.
Okay, I mean, Savelli's, we know them from London and their investments. They are long-term holders. Does that restrict your ability to bring in other family offices, or are you going to have to look some institutions? And in fact, do RCF cause any problems further down the line for you?
No, absolutely not. I mean, RCF's been really, I can't say better things about these guys. I mean, they've been very, very tremendous in terms of the support. From a company, you got to keep in mind, they've made an investment. We had a $50-60 million valuation on that hole in Manitoba at the time. We went all the way down to a $3.5 million valuation, which I think we can all agree that was not a proper market pricing when the stock was priced at that earlier this year. But they were really unwavering to support, and the same thing with the Savelli's. I mean, you really got to appreciate those type of people that understand the business that you're in and can support the ups and downs of that business. And ultimately, I think they're going to be, handsomely rewarded for that.
Fantastic. And so just in terms of how much more work do you think you need to do in each of the three assets before you do make that consideration as to which project you maybe decide to farm out or JV on? Basically, which one's your favorite child, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
Well, I mean, listen, in terms of, I don't have any children, but one thing my mother always told me when I was a kid growing up is that she said, Max, I don't have favorites. But when you talk about my favorite, it's always going to be Manitoba. It's always going to be Pine Bay. And I've always got a heart for Manitoba and Flin Flon. It's very unique affinity I have for that community. But I tell you, I love Flin Flon, Manitoba. And, these people need a discovery. And when I came on to Calnex, I instantly realized the opportunity at Pine Bay. And I focused on building a team specifically engineered to make that discovery. Now, oftentimes people don't realize, you can say, oh, Max, you lost focus or sight because you went to New Brunswick. But that's not true at all. 100%. We learned so much. We gained so much as a company in a lot of ways in terms of the assets. I mean, you look at the value of those assets, and they have tremendous upside from where they are today, particularly where zinc market is now, with the silver upside. But what we learned in New Brunswick and we took to Manitoba was utilizing IP as a vectoring tool in VMS exploration. And that's not something that's traditionally done. We had a tremendous amount of success, and that's how we doubled the resource at Nash Creek very, very quickly from 9 million tons to 19 million tons, is by using an historic IP survey that had previously been done by an operator. And oddly enough, that was actually, I think, stimulated by the government of New Brunswick at the time, they gave a grant to stimulate new exploration ideas with the Brunswick number 12 mine shutting down. And really when we were thinking about Pine Bay, it was, on my mind. Manitoba's always on my mind, even when it was perceived that maybe we left that momentarily. And what we learned in New Brunswick is we utilized and we brought IP. And that is what really was the meal ticket in a lot of ways, is the physical rock property testing on the rock and the core, because that initial discovery hole that we hit in 2016, we realized it was different. It was a very lowly conductive pyrite hosted. And we needed to bring a different vectoring approach and a different mindset. And the discovery in Manitoba is going to be a discovery really of taking a different tool set, a different mindset. It's an old camp that's got the pedigree and opportunity and every reason for more discoveries to be made in making that discovery. And if it wasn't for taking IP there, we wouldn't have been there. And if I hadn't gone to New Brunswick and myself learned about that technology and how it can be utilized, then we wouldn't have been able to lead to the success that we had in Manitoba so far. So you learn as you go along, from the good, the bad, from all walks, in this business. And I think that you've got to think differently. And that's really what 2019, 2020 is about, is it's thinking differently across the portfolio that's going to be really yielding the results that we've had.
So how important is Pine Bay to the people of Manitoba? Because there've been a few mines closed down there.
Yeah, honestly, in terms of my opinion, and I have to say this forward-looking statements, I believe that the people don't realize how important Pine Bay is to the future of Manitoba just yet. And I think that that's a situation that when you're early into a discovery, that you got to know the people that are around it obviously know and understand what they're onto much sooner. And I think our actions speak louder than the words that we may say. But ultimately, our conviction in Manitoba, our conviction at Pine Bay, is to find a large discovery. It's something that will have long-term job creation for that community for years to come. I may not be from Flin Flon, Manitoba, but I would think I'm an honorary citizen of Flin Flon, Manitoba in a lot of ways. But if you look at, Jim Pickell, his vacation home is in Flin Flon. JJ O'Donnell, our exploration manager of the team, I've got a picture at 6 years old that he's playing outside the Pine Bay headframe with his dog named Copper. So, you've got that kind of history with the team and the people. A lot of people go, Max, how did you got a guy that didn't have a background in mining? How did you get them to join you to make these discoveries on your team? Because they're obviously largely in retirement, but the reality is I captured their exploration heart, right? Everybody's got a passion in life or something that drives them. And like we had earlier in our call, and my big thing is on job creation. But really our technical team is driven by a passion for discovery in the communities that they've lived in. And when you realize that people later on in your life, you do things for different reasons, and it's not necessarily monetarily in a lot of ways, but it's what you can do to help others. And when you align that to what drives you, I think that's what's the recipe for success is across the team we've got.
Well, tell me about that. You're ex-US Global, you're a finance guy. It's all about making money, isn't it?
No, I would look differently. If you look at Steve Jobs, what did Steve Jobs want to do? Steve Jobs had a greater vision to create a product to help people. And it just so happens that when you help a lot of people, you're going to make a lot of money. And so you're right. Maybe younger in my life when I was really focused on, hey, Max wants to make this much money, Max wants to make that much money. You make decisions based upon money. You're often driven by people that are only solely invested in you to make money off of you. And that can create a world in your life, whether you want to live in it, because you're really a function of the life that you create for yourself. But is that a life that I really want to live or anybody really wants to live? Not quite frankly, no. But if you think you look the world in a little bit different perspective, and you go, hey, I'm waking up every day to help people, and my gift is I can help people through making discoveries of these mines and create jobs. Well, a byproduct to that is wealth. And you can receive a lot of wealth in a lot of ways, in different ways, just other than money. But I can tell you one thing, when I moved and left being in institutional sales at US Global, I was promised I was going to make a lot of more money going to a lot of different places a lot quicker. But I didn't make that decision when I moved to Canada. I took a 50% pay cut because I wanted to do something else that I would do for myself. And that would make me happy, because I saw a lot of people with a lot of money that are very lonely and very unhappy, to be frank.
Okay, and how do you think your shareholders should feel about that attitude of yours?
Well, I mean, I think that if you look at the results of the rethought, I mean, the results are there and they speak for themselves, and the share price speaks for itself right now. And again, I think this is a new start, obviously a reboot, but it's got a really, really bright future, and I'm very, very excited to be at the helm of this and be a part of driving this greater vision and perspective that we have for the portfolio in these areas that we explore within.
Fantastic. And when you're going around talking to institutions at the moment, because I suspect you're telling your story far and wide at the moment, what are they asking of you? What are the questions you're being asked? I
mean, listen, I think actually you ask very similar questions that I get asked. I think what a more common theme of questions is that's going to come in the future, and I think that we're going to be very, very ideally focused on that, is really on sustainable mining. And that's a big theme with Robert Friedland. I've never met Robert Friedland, and quite frankly, I always told myself the day that I hear Robert Friedland speak is the day that I finally meet Robert Friedland. Is kind of how I envision that. But I actually recently heard Robert Friedland speak, and I see a lot of the same kind of thought process and patterns of Robert Friedland and my viewpoints in the world. But really, in terms of a focus of this electrification of the world, I mean, listen. I just bought an electric toothbrush, another one. I took it. It's a heck of a lot more powerful than the one I bought 2 years ago. And, everything that I touch now has suddenly become smarter than me, or wants to be smarter than me, because of this smartification. But you can't make anything smart without having copper. I've got a 1966 Mustang. I'm nostalgic for old thing from the 1960s from some way. I'm an old soul, so to speak. That had 40 pounds of copper. A Tesla's got 150 pounds of copper. And, if you look at, the electric vehicle, that was also, and that's going to be driven by people believing in someone's greater vision. That's Elon Musk's vision for the electric vehicle. And you look who's going to be financing that. It's going to be the millennials on the Robinhood traders that are driving that stock to unparalleled valuations to allow him to capitalize, to raise the capital to build the dream. And that dream is going to be relied on mining. And the reality is that the same millennials that might not like mining are going to have to realize that anything tangible that they touch, from their cell phone to their car to the door handle to turn on the light switch, it was mined or it was grown out of the ground, and more likely than not, it was mined if they really, really like it, because it's going to be shiny, and everybody likes to let a bit something metallic in their lives.
They do. Well, Dan, thank you so much, Max. That was a good romp through all three projects. I know it's kind of early days and it's been a tough 2020 for a lot of mining folk. 2021 sounds like the year things kind of really should kick forward in terms of advancing these discoveries of yours. So do pick up the phone. Let us know how you get on. I'd be delighted to take that phone call.
Absolutely. Listen, during the pandemic, I was reading articles and things popped for me in a lot of different ways. And Isaac Newton, in the middle of the pandemic, was where all his creations really came out of. And I sent that note off to our technical team and everybody involved and said, collectively, we are Isaac Newton during this pandemic. And why everyone can look at 2020 was a year that was no good. They had the pandemic or the way their lives were affected. I think really it's been a tremendous opportunity, the pandemic, in so many different ways. And it's really allowed our discoveries to flourish. So listen, it's been a tough year. But out of tough times comes really, really great times. Listen, as we say, the company had a thunderstorm. We went through a storm, Flin Flon's thunderstorm. And after the rain always comes the rainbow. That's how one of the reasons the Rainbow Discovery got named. And I believe that. And so anytime, be happy to speak with you. And thanks so much for taking the time to interview me today.
Appreciate it, Max. Thank you very much.